Minasan konnichiwa, this is Matt Okahara from the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps, and in this video we're going to be looking at the way of the gun. More specifically, however, we're going to have a brief introduction into the history of the guns and some of the most common types of guns found in feudal Japan. The iconic image of the samurai is that of a warrior clad in ornate and impressive armour, often armed with swords and other bladed weapons. The near-mythical and often misunderstood concept of bushido has caused many to believe that the samurai shunned the use of firearms, thinking of their use as dishonourable. However, the use of firearms in Japan dates back to the 1200s and culminated with the creation of unique Japanese matchlocks known as hinawaju or tanagashima. Many of these weapons still exist today, either in the hands of private collectors or samurai museums. In 1543, a Chinese ship with Portuguese adventurers on board, seeking shelter from a storm, was forced into the waters around the island of Tanagashima in the far south of what is now called Kagoshima Prefecture, on the southern island of Kyushu. The adventurers are armed with a new type of weapon, unseen in Japan up until that point. Although simple Chinese hand cannons had existed in Japan since the 13th century, these new types of weapons had an external firing mechanism, greater range and were easy to operate. The matchlock gun had arrived in Japan, and the way the battles were fought was about to be changed forever. There was not one type of Japanese matchlock gun. Along with regional variations, guns were also defined and named depending on their size, purpose and even quality. There were many types of guns with specific battlefield roles, as well as types that were specifically designed for hunting, training or indoor use. The most numerous type of gun produced during the feudal era was known as the banzatsu, and they were carried by the infantry, also known as ashigaru. Ashigaru made up the vast majority of feudal armies at the time, and their way to fire could change a battle. But it wasn't just the infantry that carried firearms, the samurai also carried guns, and as these warriors were expected to provide their own weapons and armour, the gunsmiths of feudal Japan would custom make weapons for them. In 1548, just 5 years after the introduction of these new types of guns to Japan, guns were first used en masse in battle. The Battle of Uedahara is one of the lesser known engagements of samurai warfare, but not long after, the more famous Battle of Nagashino in 1565 became one of the significant turning points in Japanese history. Two great armies met on the field of battle on the plains of modern-day Aichi, which is around 260 kilometers southeast of central Tokyo. On one side, the famous and unstoppable cavalry of the Takeda clan prepared to charge the gunnery formations of the Oda-Tokugawa alliance. And whilst casualties were sustained by both sides, by the time the smoke had cleared and the swords had been resheathed, the Takeda force was all but wiped out. Often considered to be the first real modern battle of Japanese history, the defeat of the Takeda was one of the catalysts for the civil wars to end and the country to unify under the rule of the shogun. And once this peace had been achieved, the samurai were still expected to respond to the lords of their domains, and those lords in turn were expected to respond to the needs of the shogun. As such, the samurai continued to train their infantry in the way of the gun, and the gunsmiths of Japan carried on producing weapons up until the age of the Meiji Restoration. Although governed by strict firearms laws, the practice of hojutsu, or the martial art of gunnery, is still practiced by groups in Japan. More accurately defined as feudal gunnery as opposed to shooting in general, display teams, such as the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps, regularly host lectures, skill at arms demonstrations, and exhibitions in order to keep the samurai spirit alive. The Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps also helps to maintain and preserve a vast collection of firearms at Matsumoto Castle Museum known as the Akahane Collection. Many of the finest pieces are on public display, but the collection being so large, not all of them can be displayed at the same time. Nevertheless, the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps takes time to restore and preserve all of the firearms in the collection. Each firearm has associated notes and licenses with it. Because of this, whenever any kind of work is carried out on the guns, whether that be checking or maintaining the weapon, the gunners involved with the work have to accurately record everything they did with the weapon. It is painstaking work, but it is important as well to make sure that those firearms are left in as close to their original condition as possible. The Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps is keen to preserve Japanese history, samurai history, and the history of firearms in Japan.